Okay, so shall I just launch in and ask you a question?
Yeah, sounds good.
Brilliant. So my first question is, can you tell me a bit about your relationship with creativity?
Yeah, so I would say that my relationship with creativity has only really begun to settle in the last year or two.
Uh-huh.
So I think up until that point, I'd had quite a distant relationship with my own creativity and tended to piggyback off other people's creative ideas and be involved in a lot of projects and ideas that other people would create, but never really felt a sense of my own flow of creative thoughts and creative ideas. But I would say in the last year or two, I've really started to develop quite a healthy and enjoyable relationship with my experience of imagination and of creative flow and of experiencing creative ideas and feeling able to express those and share those and develop those
Uh-huh.
into things that I think look good or feel good or sound good. So I would say that my relationship with the creative part of myself is very soft and flowing. So I tend not to give myself a hard time if I don't feel creative.
Uh-huh.
I just really appreciate it when that sense of creativity is there and the ideas are flowing. I enjoy being in that experience, but it's not something that I feel like I have to try and force or make
Yeah.
happen. I just
Uh-huh.
appreciate it when it's there and then kind of feel like okay within myself when it's not. It's just become something that I don't feel pressured about anymore.
Lovely. Yeah, it's fascinating. Really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said some stuff in there, but I'd need to go back and listen, I think, again. But um, the gentleness and the lack of pressure sounds really important.
Yeah. I think so. Just for health and well-being more than anything else. I feel like I've got to a point in my life now where I understand that I don't have to put myself under pressure to do things that I don't want to do. And I see life as an experience within which we can all freely explore and play with and enjoy.
Uh-huh.
And pressure just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how a child is with creativity because it comes really naturally to children, I feel. And then something happens, I think, partly in the education system where that gets a bit stifled. So it sounds like you've the joyfulness and the playfulness and allowing it to be when it wants to be sounds really freeing.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. And it feels like going back to more of a childlike state in a way of just not feeling like there's a need for it, but just to enjoy it when it's there and to
Brilliant.
not really think too much about it.
Yep.
And yeah, it does feel like more of a childlike state to be in, but I guess without as much of the vulnerability around it or the embarrassment or like apprehension around it. It kind of feels like there's also an element of safety and protection as well, and a recognition that there is a natural freedom for all of us to express ourselves and to have this experience of being creative.
Uh-huh.
And we don't have to try and fight for that space or um, um, it's just there naturally for us. So there's kind of like the childlike innocence, but also kind of coupled with this sense of being quite protective and nurturing of that as well. So
Yeah.
I guess the best way to describe it would be like the mother and the child have come together.
Wow.
And that sense of creativity is able to be kind of freely explored.
That's a really beautiful description, and it really, the sense of that is very strong in the group. I think, like, I do feel very safe to put stuff into the group, and very inspired to do it. Like, I have to really hold myself back, and it makes me want, well, it's definitely made me want to be creative again. Like I said before, I think I realized that I never stopped being, I just had judged myself as not being creative, when in fact I was, if I looked at it differently. But the group I find highly motivating, and nurturing, and I feel very free in it. So that comes across. Like, obviously you've set the group up, and those feelings are within you, and I feel like that's definitely the aura of that is in the page.
That's really good that comes across, and I feel like you're free to share as much as you want in there. You don't ever feel like, you know, from my perspective, please don't ever feel like you have to hold back. It's a very open space, and I think that there's enough space for everybody to share openly what they feel they want to.
I feel like that's a really lovely message, and I hope people hear and feel that as well. Because I do hold back slightly, because I worry about, I think because I'm not in a job at the moment, so I've got plenty of time, and the thing I'm most like doing with the time is looking at art and being creative and commenting on stuff. So there's a lot I want to share every day, and I hold back probably about 50% of that at least, because I don't want other women to feel like there's just one voice dominating, or that's my worry. But I think the more other people contribute, which they are doing, then perhaps I won't feel like that, or perhaps I need other outlets as well. Anyway, it's a sideline.
Yeah, I mean, it's about doing what feels right for you in the moment, and it might be that posting something is a positive thing to do, it might be that it's not, but I guess within yourself you'll figure out what the best thing to do is. And I agree with you. I think that as more people share, it might feel safer for you to be more open and expressive, knowing that there are other voices that are present in that group as well. And I kind of see it as a gradual expansion, where the more people see other people being expressive, the more they're likely to take that step and take that risk of being expressive there themselves. And so I truly value the content that you share, and often feel quite inspired by the posts that you share. So I think that even though you might feel like you share a lot, I don't want you to feel like it's not valued or appreciated either, because it very much is. And I think that it's a wonderful thing to have you sharing and posting in the group. So I don't want you to ever feel like you can't do that, or you shouldn't be doing that.
I just had a thought on something you said earlier, which is, you were saying in the last year you feel like you've stepped more into your creativity, and you were talking about piggybacking on other people's, which I think is fine, actually. That's something else I've learned from this group, that I think that's really all right when you're in that phase. That's part of the journey to stepping into your own creativity more. But I'm just curious, what was the turning point that made you feel you went from doing that to stepping more into your own creative flow?
I think it really came down to the recognition of when I was sharing things that didn't feel like, there was just a sense that it wasn't mine to share, that it wasn't coming from a place of authenticity within me. It was coming from a place of, this is what I feel like I have to share in order to be seen as being creative. But it wasn't actually coming from a centered or grounded or authentic place. It was coming from, this is what I think I should be doing.
Right.
Because this is what other people are doing, or this is what I'm seeing other people doing. And I guess it was really digging deep within myself and finding my voice and my connection to creativity and really nurturing that connection, that I started to feel more uncomfortable when I was sharing things that didn't feel like they were coming from an authentic place. I started to feel kind of, it didn't feel good to me anymore to do that. And actually, if even though it's terrifying sometimes to speak your own truth, it often felt better.
Yeah.
Than saying things or doing things that might have been what somebody else were doing, but didn't actually feel like they were coming from my heart, my mind, and my soul.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, and makes a lot of sense to me. I've experienced both feelings. I really identify with what you're saying. And it's inspiring as well. I feel like there's a lot of people that have a fear around expressing themselves, but almost 100% of the time when they do, everybody feels an immediate connection to them because they're being authentic. It's like you can't be wrong if you're being authentic, it feels to me. I know on the page when people do share and it feels like it's come from the heart or their soul or their depth, that I just feel so close to them, and a lot of love when people do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I have the same experience as well, because it reflects the depth that we have within ourselves, and we can recognize an essence of ourselves in that person, even though the way that they express things might not be how we express things, or the way that they share things might not be the way that we share things, but there's just an element of truth in it that's universal, and that's just like I've got goosebumps thinking about it. It's just like a feeling. For me, it's like a feeling of safety and of knowing that I can feel safe with that person, or I can feel at peace with that person, because I know that they're unafraid to share their true selves.
Yes.
And it's endearing. It is that, like, you want to be close to people that are just naturally expressive. So I definitely experienced that myself as well.
And it's interesting what you're saying. It sort of hits on that universal truth. There's like an individual truth, but somehow that then becomes a universal truth as well.
Yeah.
And when people speak up and out, I don't know, it just like, it's very connecting, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think the same. Yeah.
Oh, exciting. You're saying some amazing stuff. Oh, so my next question is, what would you say your main creative talents, skills, and interests are?
So the things that I feel drawn to doing creatively are writing at the moment, which is new for me. I never considered myself as being a writer, and I've never trained in writing. I've never really studied beyond GCSEs, studying English, but I feel like I can express the deepest core of myself when I write. I feel like that's the place where I can just articulate some of my inner experiences in a way that feels good for me. So the writing's become a way that I like to express myself creatively. I like to doodle. I wouldn't say I was going to say I like to draw, but I call it doodling. I like to doodle. And I like doodling because I kind of have this way of approaching it where I don't think about what I'm gonna draw. I just put the pencil or the pen on the paper, and I just draw what feels good, and then it just becomes what it is. And it's often nothing at all, just lines and colours. But I find that really therapeutic to do, quite relaxing. And I guess my main creative talent that is more public is the bass, so playing music, writing music, which is something I feel is very much in my roots, because my dad's a musician.
Wow.
Some of our family on my dad's side are musicians, so I was born into this musical world. And my granddad actually was a pastor of a Pentecostal church in Bradford, so I was kind of born into this like musical spiritual world. So I've always been immersed in like music and creativity and spirituality from being born.
Wow.
So I think that's why I feel quite drawn to music and to spiritual exploration as well. And the bass guitar just seems to be the instrument that I resonate the most with as an individual. Like it's all in the hips is the bass.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that kind of feminine like movement. It just captures that, like those deep low vibrations that I find to be quite feminine. And that's just where I kind of like soulfully sit, I think, in like my natural state of being. I'm like, I kind of like just love like groovy, like subtle feminine movements and stuff. So the bass for me is where I feel like I can express that kind of feminine, deeper, soulful part of myself creatively.
Wow.
So yeah, so those are the things that I tend to do the most of, just sort of writing, doodling, and playing bass guitar and writing music, really.
That's fantastic. That's a pretty good range, Janine, isn't it?
Yes, good, thank you.
I would love to see some of your. Do you write song lyrics?
No, I don't. And Jamie's asked me if I would write song lyrics for him in the past, and I have written them when I've been asked to write them.
Okay.
But it's not something that comes naturally to me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting in what you were just describing then. It reminds me that the river of creativity bubbles up in us in unexpected ways sometimes, doesn't it? Like you were saying that writing's quite new, and I know our friend Emma didn't quite know she could draw like she can, and she said it just suddenly happened one day, like a bit later on in life, really. And that fascinates me, that we don't know how it's going to bubble out. And there's a phrase that Richard McCann, who lives in Leeds, says, where he says, "I can't do it yet," or "I haven't done it yet." And I love that because it just leaves the path open. And I think that's a really intriguing thing about creativity, is you don't quite know how it's going to come out of you. And I do believe it is in every single person. And that's very exciting, I think, and limitless.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the potential is endless, and I absolutely agree that every single human being on the planet has access to that sense of creativity and that kind of like, you know, the river of flow of creative ideas. Like that's just innate within all of us. Like you know, that's just natural regardless of anything. I think that's something that we're all like inherently born with. And I think that from my experience anyway, I think the reason it took me so long to find my sense of creativity was because of being conditioned away from it.
Yes.
You know, because I imagine as a child, if I had been kind of nurtured to engage with and connect with this sense of creativity and to allow that to be what guides me through living my life and making choices, which is kind of how I live now. But had that been supported within me when I was at school or growing up, it's likely that I'd have probably felt more connected to this part of myself when I was younger. And I feel like the journey that I've been on, like the spiritual creative journey I've been on, has actually undoing all that conditioning. Undoing the beliefs and the thoughts in my mind that say, I know that feels really good to you and you really want to do it, but you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z, or because back when you were 12 somebody took the piss out of you for doing that, so you know that's off limits now, you can't do that anymore. And I think a lot of my journey back to finding creativity is undoing all of that and seeing that for what it is, and then realizing that that doesn't have to be a limit on how we express ourselves and what we do. And kind of beyond all of that, there is this like deeper wisdom that says, no, actually you can do it, and you're allowed to do it, and you're allowed to follow those good feelings. You're allowed to feel drawn by the things that really attract you and the things that you really want to do. Like you don't have to be afraid of that feeling, that natural guidance from within. And even though there are anxious thoughts and the conditioning's still there, but I've just developed more of a resilience to it, and more of a grounding in the freedom that I know I've got to be more creative and to be more expressive and to share my natural voice and to do the things that I want to do in life.
Fantastic. You've reminded me too that I feel like reading other people's statements on my own experience, there's something about creativity that transcends those negative thoughts and anxieties. It's such a powerful force that I feel like it's one of the few things I feel like that can lift me up out of it. And I've heard lots of other people say that, which is really fascinating, I think. And there's something else that just crossed my mind. Just the poetry article that I shared in the group yesterday by a woman that's from Leeds, and she was talking about how the current government are trying to sort of subdue and suppress the creative elements in the education curriculum and what she feels about that. And I just resonated with pretty much every word she said. It's powerful, it's political. I'm watching something on the telly at the moment about the origins of street dance, and the first episode they're in Brazil and they've gone to the favelas and they're talking to everybody there, and just saying that the current prime minister is very anti-creativity. He's trying to suppress it because probably on some level he knows how powerful it is and undeniable, and if you can how strengthening it is to the human spirit to express ourselves that way. So
I mean there are some that, like, that's just a conversation in itself, isn't it, about politics and creativity and population control, and I mean,
right.
There's so much to that you know that can run as deeply as education, and how children sometimes aren't always guided and supported and nurtured in being able to connect with their own sense of imagination and understanding of life and creativity, and how that can ripple out into people just living really like half lives almost, you know, not feeling able to be their complete full selves, that can, you know, not living to their full human potential, because they've not had the opportunity to really connect with and explore their minds and imaginations and their own natural sense of creativity. And then how people can then be really easily manipulated and controlled into living these really small, easy to manage lives, you know. And so there's so much in that. I mean, I'm not well read, or I don't know a lot about politics and society beyond my own personal experience of it and odd bits that I've read. I think my world knowledge is probably quite limited, really, because I've never really looked beyond my own life until recently. I don't know if that's just a natural part of getting older and becoming more mature, that you become more interested in what's happening within the rest of society and find how different cultures work. But it's definitely something that I'm becoming more and more aware of, in how there are so many people who don't necessarily have the opportunity to live a full, happy, healthy, vibrant life, and how that can really impact their quality of life. And there's a lot to that I don't think I can speak to, because I don't really have the experience or understanding of it at this point in time.
One thing I've found from doing creative workshops in lots of different communities in Leeds is that it's never failed with anybody anywhere of any ability or state of mind. So I've worked with homeless people, I've worked with asylum seekers, I've worked with children, parents in schools, people suffering from depression. Everybody responds universally. It's incredible to witness that, I think.
I can imagine. I know, like, I did some work in the mental health field, and mental health is actually one of the kind of fields of experience that I'm really interested in and passionate about as well. And I used to support people and take them to art groups, and there is just something about being creatively expressive that really calms the mind down. And I know I've noticed that within myself, and I've also noticed it within people that I've supported in the past as well. So absolutely, there is definitely a universal element to being creative and creatively expressive, and also that being a really important part of our well-being as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
You're going to have fun editing this, Janine.
I'm probably not going to edit it. I'm probably just going to I'll just nip the beginning off when we were talking, and then I'll just end it wherever you feel like you want to end it. But yeah, it's been an amazing conversation.
It's brilliant. I'm loving it. I've got more.
Cool.
Are you up for the next one?
Yeah.
So all right, the next question, and you will have mentioned this a bit, but what inspires you and really sets you on fire creatively?
Okay, so I think spiritual truth is a big one for me. So one of my passions is to explore the mind, explore spirituality, and to understand our natural sense of being human, and our natural, just our kind of natural, just our true nature, essentially. So like, if we take everything away, if we take all of the conditioning, if we take all of the labels, what's left? You know, what's there? The energy of who we are. So I find that exploration for me is really inspiring, and the insights that I have from doing that inner work of exploring my mind and challenging thoughts and just bringing together all of the experience that I've had, the life experience, I find really inspires a lot of my creative expression. So that's huge for me. And also, every time I realise that I can, it's just a huge inspiration for me, because I think it's normal that at times I get caught up in my thinking and that conditioning and the anxiety, and I can sometimes like close myself down unnecessarily, and then there might just be, it'll just be like a spark of insight that goes, you don't need to listen to any of that, just do it, you can do it. And that often inspires me.
There's a lot to be said, I think, for the just doing it. It's like when you step into that space, the creativity kind of comes to meet you. And I almost feel like the first creative act gives birth to the next creative act.
Yeah.
Like it sort of fertilizes it somehow.
Definitely. Like, I experienced that sense of flow and of kind of moving through a passage, a journey of like one step leading to the next step. Definitely.
Yeah. Just connected to that, because you're in a band, what's that like, the sort of collective creativity?
It's good. It's really good. So I think I'm really lucky in that the band that I'm in, I get on really, really well with the other members, and from the start we just naturally sparked, we just naturally connected. The chemistry was really, really good with us, and it kind of feels like an adventure every time we play together.
Wow.
Especially if we're playing live on stage, like that in itself is an experience where you just don't know what's going to happen. So we learn the songs, but we never know how it's going to play out live. So I think, so it's kind of like it's like being on a journey together.
Yeah.
While we're playing together, and we're just in the moment together, and we're feeling the music, we're feeling the rhythm and the beats and the melody. And it's just an adventure for us all to be on together. And when we play a song well, when we've played it kind of how we intended to play it and it's gone really well, like that's just a really beautiful feeling of accomplishment that we get to share with each other as well.
Gorgeous.
So yeah, it's nice. I think if you're in a band that you enjoy and you get on with the people in the band, it's an opportunity to have a really kind of sacred experience of collective creativity, that just feels really good, and you can share those experiences with one another, and it does feel like being on a journey with friends and being on a journey together, and of kind of not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how it's going to work out. So it's just quite exciting.
Sounds it. And it sounds like there's quite a good level of trust as well in each other. Like, yeah, just from what you're describing. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, the trust is definitely there because I think it has to be. I think being creative is quite a vulnerable experience, and so I would feel uncomfortable doing it if I was in a band with people that I didn't wholly trust and feel comfortable with bearing my soul to, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a large element of trust there, and also of kind of the camaraderie as well. So it kind of feels like whatever happens, because it's natural for any kind of creative project, there's always failures and there's always things that go wrong. That's just natural. But there's kind of a sense of we're all taking care of each other through it as well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I've heard other bands talk of a similar thing. Yeah, great. Thank you. Right, next question. What do you need to help you be at your creative best? What do you need around you or in your life or your environment?
Quiet.
Okay.
So I like a lot of quiet in my personal environment. So I'm quite lucky where I live now. The dining room that I work out of is my room, basically. So it's got all of my pictures up on the wall.
Wow.
And what I tend to do is just close the door. If I feel like I want some space and time for myself, I'll close the curtains. I've got some like pretty fairy lights in there. So I'll just turn all the lights off, close the curtains, and I'll just put some music on and maybe dance and do a bit of yoga. But that's like a sanctuary for me. I can feel quite overwhelmed by there being a lot of noise and chaos in my environment. So having a space where I can feel like I can just be quiet, be still, and just kind of let all of the noise of the world fall away is really important for me, because I feel like I can be like cocooned in this sense of just peace and solitude and quiet.
Yep.
So I find that if I don't have a lot of that, my mind can get quite busy, and that kind of blocks me from feeling connected to my creativity. So yeah, definitely quiet, and I guess quiet and time to myself as well is really important.
That's a nice thing to hear as well. I think that's quite an important thing for fellow creative people to hear, because sort of making that time is a way of honoring yourself, I feel. And it can be quite easy to let that energy get dissipated, or people to knock the boundaries, or so carving out that sounds amazing. And also the physical thing, like you're describing the yoga. I know for myself, when I go for a walk, I'll often get a rush of creative thoughts come on the walk. It seems to take me to a bit of a higher level, or connect me deeper to myself and what's going on in my spirit.
Yeah, that's amazing. The movement I find is quite important, because I was having a conversation with some work colleagues about this yesterday, actually, about how I find movement quite therapeutic. And I think that we have a natural fight or flight response when we experience any kind of anxiety or fear, and it expresses itself differently in different people. So some people might find that if they feel anxious or afraid, they might become antagonistic. Some people might want to flee and avoid the situation. And for me, it expresses myself as the freeze response.
Right.
So if I feel anxious or fearful, my kind of natural inclination is to want to retreat into myself.
Okay.
and become very still and tense, and to not, you know, I don't want to make any noise, I don't want to draw any attention to myself, and I almost become like a rock, you know,
Right.
just kind of tense and kind of like afraid within myself. So for me, movement counteracts that in a really beautiful way. So what I've learned to do is, when I feel like I'm getting to that place where I just want to retreat within myself because of anxiety and fear, I've started dancing or doing a bit of yoga, and I find that it just reminds me that I don't have to freeze up in those moments where I feel anxious and afraid, that I'm still able to move, I'm still able to move my body and to respond to what's going on. So definitely movement is so therapeutic.
Wow.
I think it's so good for us to do, especially if we feel like we can't or we don't want to. It can just be really good to remind ourselves that even in difficult circumstances or difficult situations, we can still move and respond.
That's really inspiring, and it reminds me of when my daughter has sometimes dragged me up off a sofa to like make a TikTok or do a silly dance, and I can be quite resistant if I've gone into that slightly rock-like state. But she's managed to pull me out of it quite a few times, and I'll be amazed, like you said, about once you start moving, it can sort of free you up again. That's really interesting. Right, we have a few more.
Cool.
Do you have a favorite piece that you've created, whether that's music or a dance or a doodle or any of your creative expressions? Have you got a standout one for yourself?
So I guess the one that's coming to mind at the moment is a song that I wrote a couple of years ago when I wrote it about being mentally unwell, actually, and how that experience felt. And it was the first song that I've ever written on my own. I just wrote it on bass guitar. But I think that's probably the standout thing that I've created for myself that I can think of right now.
Okay. It would be amazing to hear that or see that somewhere
I'll
online.
send it to you.
Thank
Or
you.
I'll post it into the group, actually.
That would be brilliant. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. I'd love to hear the lyrics and the bass, and great. Thank you.
Cool.
Next question, Janine. Do you have a creative message for the world?
Yes. So it would be that you have creativity within you always, irrespective of any factors of life, gender, race, age, geographical location. It's universal. You have access to it always, and you are always free to engage in it and express it however you want to, in whatever way feels good for your body and your mind.
Beautiful. Lovely message for the world, is that? It reminds me as well of when I've read some accounts of Holocaust survivors, and some people saying that no matter what, they seem to find a way to create art, and that really, really, really kept them going. But something in what you said just reminded me of that. Like, somehow it is always available, even if I've sometimes written things on scrappy bits of paper, if that's when it's bubbled up and I've got nothing else to hand, or I've written something in my head, and then when I've got the ability to put it down, then I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always there, always available.
Yeah.
And it's always for you as well, I think, is a really important thing to remember. So I wrote a post this morning about it, actually, that was triggered by an insight of realizing that the things that we access within our own minds in terms of imagination and our inner experiences are completely, they're ours, individually.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just nice to realize that whatever creative experiences you have within yourself are wholly yours.
Yes.
I think that's really nice to remember as well, that you can use all of that is available for you. Like, there's nothing that you experience within your mind that is ever off limits for you.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, the next question. If you could wave a magic wand and use creativity to change one thing about the world as it is now, what would that be?
I think it would just be that I would want to wake people up to it. People that maybe have forgotten that they have this connection to imagination and creativity, and I think I would just want people to know that it's there and that it's accessible and that they can express it. Because I think that in itself would change the world if people knew that they had unlimited access to this natural state of creativity and expression.
Yes.
I think there would be a lot less. Well, I just think that people would feel a lot happier within themselves, and I think people would feel a lot more just at peace within themselves and with the reality that we've got.
Yes, I really agree with you, and you're reminding me that in my last job, I got increasingly passionate about setting up a space where people could come and have creative experiences or share their creative talents or discover their creative talents. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's not what I set out to do when I had the job, and it's not necessarily what my managers wanted me to do either, but it became like a burning thing, and I've that stayed with me. And I guess like it made me realize I've sort of been doing that all my life, but it's just got stronger and stronger and stronger because it's one of the most empowering things I can think of. And what I used to find in groups is that if you're helping provide a creative space or facilitate a creative space, everybody enters that on a totally equal footing. Nobody is a client or a service user or a victim. Everybody's equal on the creative plane, it feels to me anyway. That's how I've experienced it. So I find it very empowering and liberating, and yeah, and I don't care what people create in that space. I always find all of it fantastic personally. That's how I've always experienced it.
Absolutely. Oh, so beautiful. And I agree with you. There is an undeniable sense of equality in the creative field. And it's a beautiful place to connect from a state of equality. There's a gorgeous quote by I think she's a Buddhist teacher called Pema Chodron, and she talks about compassion, and she says that compassion is not a relationship between a healer and the wounded, it's a relationship between equals. And I think that that's in essence the state of creativity as well. It's about connecting as equals and recognizing that nobody has more of a connection to creativity, nobody has a better or worse connection to creativity because of anything to do with circumstances. We are all completely equal. And it's just beautiful to express from and connect from that place of knowing that. So really yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what else happens, especially in a community like where I live in Hare Hills, where people feels like resources are scarce, but talent is huge. So I feel
quite. I'm gonna grab a tissue. Sorry.
No problem.
A runny nose.
I feel quite a burning drive to try and bring more opportunities here. Like it happens within certain organisations, but I would love to help create more spaces where that becomes more visible to people.
Yeah. Well, I
Great.
truly hope that you're able to make that happen, and I think it would be wonderful if you can offer that to a community like Hare Hills, because I think it would be well appreciated.
I think so too. Yeah. I'll keep looking. Very last question, just is there anything else you'd like to say that I haven't covered in the questions?
Other than I would like to interview you in this way, I think, because some of the things that we've spoke about today, I think that you have a lot more to say on the subject of creativity. So I would love to be able to ask you more about your relationship with creativity and how you think and feel about things in the world, because I think that you're a very passionate woman, and I think you've probably got a lot to say, and I'd love to hear more of what you have to say. So
thank you.
So I would like to set that up if that's something you'd be interested in doing. And other than that, just I think we've covered everything. I guess all I'd want to leave with really is just to remember that space of creativity is always available, and you can access it at any time, and it's completely universal and completely unconditional as well.